Today was supposed to be the day my fiancé, Alex Dawson, and I registered our marriage. I sat at the city courthouse for 3 long hours waiting for him. When I finally managed to reach him by phone, it was the voice of his old girlfriend, Chloe White, that answered. "Where's Alex?" I asked, my voice tight. "He's cooking for me," she replied casually. "Did you need him for something, Miss Miller?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. Cooking? I had been with Alex for 2 years, and in all that time I was certain he didn't know how to do much more than boil water. Just then, Alex's voice came through the phone. "Sarah, Chloe almost fainted today. Her family isn't here, so I'm just helping to take care of her." I, Sarah Miller, had never fainted in my entire life. But on this specific day, the day we were supposed to get our marriage license, she just happened to collapse. The timing was unbelievably convenient. I clutched my phone tighter. "Alex, I'm going to ask you one question. Are you still coming to register our marriage today?" "I really can't get away right now," he said, his tone impatient. "It won't make a difference if we do it in a couple of days." I was about to say something else when I heard Chloe's surprised voice in the background exclaim, "Ah, that's hot!" The call was immediately disconnected. I didn't have to see it to know what was happening. Alex would be fussing over her, full of concern, comforting her as if she were the most fragile and important person in the world. Ever since Chloe came back, a single tear from her was enough to make Alex act like his world was ending. But I never received that kind of gentle treatment. In Alex's eyes, I was always supposed to be the sensible, understanding, and mature one. He never seemed to grasp that I was also a woman who sometimes needed his care and attention. My chest felt tight, but it wasn't the kind of sharp pain I would have expected. Listening to the dead silence on the phone line, I took a deep breath, managed a bitter smile, and sent him one final text message. "Alex Dawson, let's break up." I've had enough. Since he was so determined to comfort his precious Chloe, I decided to let them be together. Just as I was walking out of the courthouse, I saw a man standing near the entrance. It was Daniel Reed, my boss and the CEO of the Reed Group. I stopped, surprised. As his secretary, I knew his schedule, and a visit here wasn't on it. "Mr. Reed, are you getting married today too?" I asked. Daniel glanced at me with his dark eyes and answered calmly, "Yes." "Well, congratulations," I said. I wanted to ask why he was there by himself, but I quickly reminded myself that as his employee, it wasn't my place to ask about his personal life. I held back the question that was on the tip of my tongue. Then, Daniel gave me a small smile. "Miss Miller, would you be interested in marrying me?" I blinked, completely taken aback. Had Daniel also been stood up? His voice was deep and steady. "Since we're both here alone, why don't we just marry each other?" Just then, a message from Alex popped up on my phone. "Sarah, stop it. Chloe really is sick. Be good. We'll register our marriage in a couple of days." I looked up at Daniel and smiled. "Sure, let's do it." In less than 10 minutes, I was holding a new marriage certificate. As I looked at the photo of us on it, I suddenly wondered if I had been too impulsive. "Having second thoughts already?" Daniel asked, his tone light. I pressed my lips together and then asked him, "Are you doing this because you're angry with Miss Adams?" As his secretary, I knew a little about his personal affairs. I had even helped him choose gifts for this Miss Adams. I had never met her, but I knew that any woman Daniel Reed put that much effort into must be special. Daniel looked at me and said quietly, "She's not worth it. You'll understand later." When it came to my boss, I usually just followed his instructions. He was, after all, the one who signed my paychecks. But in that moment, I thought I saw a hint of sadness in his eyes that didn't fit the powerful CEO image he usually projected. After we parted ways, I went back to the small apartment I owned. During my time with Alex, we had never officially lived together, so I had bought this place for myself. The first thing I did when I got home was delete his number and block him on all social media. From now on, he could go his own way and I would go mine. And then it hit me that my path now included Daniel Reed. He said he would give me a week to get used to the idea, and then I would need to move into his house. The thought of spending nearly every hour of the day with him made me feel a little nervous. During the day, he was my boss, and at night, I suddenly felt a bit lost. I had no idea why Daniel had suggested this sudden marriage. Was he just angry at Miss Adams? I had only been his secretary for a month. We hardly knew each other. And yet, I had agreed. Was I thinking clearly? Or was I just impressed by his good looks? I was still lost in these thoughts when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Sarah Miller, did you block me? Alex Dawson's angry voice came through the phone, filled with frustration. I could easily imagine the dark look on his face. That was typical of him. Anytime I showed the slightest bit of emotion, he would call me unreasonable and get an attitude. But he never seemed to have a problem with Chloe acting that way around him. He didn't seem to appreciate the version of me that had always tried to make excuses for him and keep things peaceful. Well, we're broken up now, I said. Why wouldn't I block you? My sarcastic tone seemed to make him even angrier. Can you stop being so immature? If you still want to register our marriage, we can go tomorrow. I actually laughed. Alex, you're not the only man on the planet. You missed your chance. With that, I hung up the phone and blocked his number completely. It was a clean and final break. The next morning, as I was heading out for work, a familiar car pulled up beside me. It was Alex's. He got out and walked toward me, his first words already sharp. Sarah Miller, are you finished with this tantrum? Can you stop being so childish? Blocking someone is just ridiculous. I rolled my eyes. Mr. Dawson, do you have a bad memory? We've already broken up. He stared at me, and for the first time, it seemed to sink in that I wasn't joking. Chloe really was sick yesterday. I was just taking care of her. If that's why you're angry, I apologize. It was such a half-hearted apology. I couldn't help but wonder how I had managed to tolerate him for 2 years. I sighed, feeling a little sorry for the person I used to be. I looked up at him. Alex, you and Chloe both know exactly what kind of relationship you have. As your ex-girlfriend, let me give you some advice. Open your eyes. Step aside, Sarah, he said, clearly annoyed. What are you trying to imply? Chloe hasn't done anything to you. She's just a good friend of mine. Of course, she was the person he cared about most, and he couldn't handle me saying a single negative thing about her. I shrugged, indifferent, pushed past him, and raised my hand to hail a taxi. Just then, a sleek black Bentley pulled up beside me. A driver got out and walked over to me. Ma'am, Mr. Reed has a meeting this morning and asked me to drive you to work, he said politely. It took me a moment to realize he was talking about Daniel. I had almost forgotten that I had married him yesterday. That was one of the strange things about a whirlwind marriage. Before I could respond, Alex turned to the driver and asked sharply, What did you just call her? The driver glanced at him. This is my employer's wife. Of course, I called her ma'am. Alex looked completely shocked. Sarah Miller, when did you get married? Yesterday, I said lightly, then turned and got into the car without looking back at him. That must have been a major shock to him. Alex had always believed that I would never leave him, that I was someone he could always count on, no matter how many times he canceled our plans for Chloe. And in the past, I had always forgiven him. But not this time. Back at the office, I immediately got into work mode. I organized all the documents from different departments that needed Daniel Reed's signature and then handed them to his assistant, Ben Carter. But Ben didn't take the documents from me. Instead, he smiled and said, From now on, Miss Miller, you'll be delivering these to him yourself. I hesitated. When I had been promoted to the CEO's secretary, Ben had given me a list of rules to follow. One of them was that I should never enter Daniel's office without his permission. Sensing my hesitation, Ben explained, The CEO said you can go in and out of his office freely from now on. There was a knowing look in his eyes. I figured he must have already heard about my marriage to Daniel. Fine. Holding the stack of documents, I walked over to the door and knocked. To be honest, I still hadn't figured out how to act around Daniel. Having my boss suddenly become my husband was undeniably strange. Behind his large desk, Daniel was focused on reading a file. I quickly put the documents on his desk, hoping to slip out quietly. But then I heard his familiar, cool voice from behind me. Miss Miller! I took a deep breath, put on a professional smile, and turned around. Mr. Reed, I've put the documents on your desk. Do you need anything else? He put his pen down, leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed, and looked at me with a slight smile. I instinctively touched my face, wondering if my makeup had smudged. After a moment, he finally asked, Have you had breakfast? I responded quickly, Are you asking if you want me to order breakfast for you? I can do that right away. I had done it a few times before when Ben had asked me to arrange breakfast for him. Daniel's lips curved into a small smile. You really are a dedicated employee, Miss Miller. I suppose so, I replied. Otherwise, you wouldn't have promoted a new employee like me to be your secretary. I wasn't trying to be modest. Honestly, I couldn't think of any other reason. I had originally applied for a job in the design department, but then I was suddenly told that I had been hired as the CEO's secretary. If it hadn't been for the much higher salary, I wouldn't have taken the job. Daniel's eyes seemed to sparkle for a moment at my words. Then he raised a hand and pointed toward a side cabinet. There's breakfast over there. Go eat. I froze, a little confused, not quite sure what he meant. Daniel, ever patient, added, You have stomach problems because you don't eat regularly, especially skipping breakfast. That breakfast is for you. Eat it. The last time he had brought me breakfast, I had thought it was strange. And now, how did he even know I had stomach issues? I couldn't help but ask, Mr. Reed, how do you know I have a stomach problem, and how do you know I skipped breakfast? His tone remained calm and cool. You're my secretary. Shouldn't I know a few things about you? After a pause, he looked at me again. And besides, Miss Miller, have you forgotten that you're not just my employee anymore? You're also the person on my marriage certificate. I have no desire to become a widower right after getting married. The way he said it sounded so matter-of-fact, but something about it made my chest feel a little tight. A strange warmth started to spread through me. Alex and I had been together for 2 years, and he had never once noticed my health problems, let alone reminded me to eat. I remembered one time when my stomach hurt so much I could hardly stand up. I called him and asked if he could bring me some medicine. All he said was, Just order it online. I'm busy. Then he hung up before I could say anything else. Later, I found out from one of his friends that Alex's urgent matter that day was picking Chloe up from the airport. I realized then that in his heart, I would always be second to her. Maybe the entire time we were together was just because Chloe hadn't come back yet. Maybe I was just her replacement. Miss Miller? That faint, clean, masculine scent drifted past my nose, snapping me out of my thoughts. Daniel's handsome face was suddenly very close, and my heart skipped a beat. Mr. Reed, is there something you need? With just one sentence, Daniel had erased all the heavy feelings I had been carrying. He raised his hand and gently tapped my forehead. Stop daydreaming. Eat your breakfast. That small gesture made my face flush. Instinctively, I glanced toward the office door, worried that someone might walk in and see us. Even though I was married to Daniel Reed, I still didn't want anyone at the company to know. I could only imagine how many people would start gossiping about me. Daniel noticed my cautious look and chuckled. Relax, not just anyone can come into my office. I quickly walked over to the coffee table and picked up the breakfast. Then I'll just take it back to my desk to eat. You're not worried people might get the wrong idea when they see you walking out of my office with breakfast? He asked lightly. I paused. He had a point. Silently, I turned around and sat down on the couch. Then I'll eat here before I go back. Only then did Daniel seem satisfied. He went back to his desk and continued to review his files. The office became almost uncomfortably quiet, so much so that I was afraid to chew too loudly, worried I might disturb the silence. I had to admit, the breakfast he had prepared was perfect for me. It was light and easy on my stomach. It was very thoughtful. He actually seemed like a surprisingly considerate person. I glanced up without thinking, looking over at the man behind the desk. The warm office lights cast soft shadows on his sharp, handsome features. I remembered how some of my female colleagues had always talked about how attractive he was. Before, I had only seen him as my boss, so I had never really paid attention. But now, sitting here and really looking at him, I had to admit he was genuinely good-looking, and somehow, I had married him. Perhaps sensing my stare, Daniel looked up. I panicked and quickly looked away, stuffing the last bite of breakfast into my mouth. Then I stood up and said, Mr. Reed, I've finished eating. I'll go back to work now. Just as I reached the door, I heard his warm voice behind me. Sarah, let's have dinner together tonight. I didn't answer, not yes or no, and hurried out of the office. Honestly, I didn't know how to react to being called Sarah by him like that. When I was with Alex Dawson, I had always been the one pursuing him. Now, suddenly being treated this way, especially by my boss, felt strange and unfamiliar. Soon the workday was over. By the time I finished everything I needed to do, it was already 7:00 p.m. I glanced over at the CEO's office. The lights were still on. I had no idea when he had finished for the day. I wondered if he remembered what he had said about having dinner this morning. If he forgot, That might actually be for the best. Staring at Daniel Reed's face for too long might make my heart race. Just as that thought crossed my mind, a message popped up on my phone. It was from Daniel. "I'm waiting in the parking garage." I sighed quietly and accepted my fate, heading downstairs. "Miss Miller, are you waiting for someone?" A voice called out near the elevator in the garage. It was Mark Lynn, the marketing manager. I nodded. "Yeah." He stared at me for a moment, then asked, "Sarah, when are you free? Let's get dinner sometime." I frowned slightly. When I first joined the company, Mark had asked me out to dinner more than once. I had turned him down every time, but he still hadn't gotten the hint. I knew exactly what he was after. I was just about to politely decline again when my phone rang. Seeing Daniel's name on the screen, I quickly answered it. "Hello?" "Exit B." "Got it, I'm on my way." Hanging up, I gave Mark a quick nod before hurrying toward exit B. Sure enough, Daniel's Bentley was waiting there. I instinctively reached for the back door, planning to sit in the back seat, but his voice came from the driver's seat. "Do you really think I'm your chauffeur, Miss Miller?" I laughed softly and slid into the front passenger seat. "Habit, I guess." He glanced at me. "You seemed pretty popular back there." That comment had a slight edge to it. I paused, then realized he must have seen me talking to Mark. Wait, was Daniel Reed jealous? As soon as that thought entered my mind, I felt a surge of boldness and asked him directly, "Daniel Reed, are you jealous?" He let out a low scoff and didn't answer, starting the car instead, but I clearly saw his hands tighten just a little on the steering wheel. It was the kind of awkwardness you feel when someone correctly calls you out. Daniel didn't say anything, but his reaction had made me feel a little flustered. The restaurant he took me to for dinner was a 5-star Western place. Of course, a life with someone like him came with these kinds of benefits. While we were waiting for our food, I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way back, I saw Daniel standing at the end of the corridor, finishing a phone call. Just as I was about to walk toward him, I saw a familiar figure suddenly bump into him. It looked like an accident, but I could tell she had done it on purpose. That woman. Wasn't it Chloe White? "Oh no, I'm so sorry," Chloe exclaimed, her voice overly sweet. She looked up at Daniel, pretending to be flustered. Daniel immediately took a large step back and gave her a quick, unimpressed look. Still pretending to be innocent, she said softly, "Hi, sir. Can I get your number?" "No," Daniel replied coldly, then turned and walked away without another word. Chloe stomped her foot in frustration, clearly annoyed by the rejection. Watching the whole thing happen, I couldn't help but smile to myself. That little act she had just pulled, trying to flirt with Daniel, was obviously intentional. I wondered what Alex would think if he had seen that. After all, Chloe had always been the innocent, pure girl in his eyes, his precious, untouchable Chloe. When I got back to the table, the food had already arrived. I was surprised to see that Daniel had ordered all of my favorite dishes. He really did seem to know me well. We were about halfway through our meal when a familiar voice interrupted us. "Miss Miller, what are you doing here?" I didn't even have to look up. I knew it was Chloe. Then came Alex's voice, full of anger. "Sarah Miller, is this why you broke up with me? Because you already had someone else?" I had originally planned to just ignore them, but hearing the way they spoke to me, as if I had done something wrong, I couldn't help but laugh. "And what does where I am or who I'm with have to do with either of you?" Chloe looked hurt. "But this is a 5-star restaurant for couples, and you're here with another man." I wasn't going to let that slide. "What, do you own this place? Or are you saying I'm not good enough to eat here? That I can't have dinner with another man?" Alex's face darkened, and even Chloe's sweet expression started to crumble. "Sarah, you're the one who's in the wrong here. Why are you being so aggressive?" Alex snapped. "Who is this man? Why are you with him?" A cool, calm voice cut in before I could answer. "You're not qualified to know." Daniel, who had kept his back to them until now, slowly turned around. His cold gaze swept over both Alex and Chloe. Chloe was the first to freeze, her triumphant smile fading into jealousy. So the man she had just tried to flirt with was him. Alex, too, was clearly shaken by Daniel's intimidating presence. He stood stiffly, stunned into silence. I stepped up beside Daniel and slipped my arm through his. Smiling, I said, "Let me introduce you. This is my husband, Daniel." "What?" Alex's face twisted in disbelief. "Isn't he your boss?" No wonder he looked familiar. Alex had seen him once from a distance at a business event. "Daniel Reed, the CEO of the Reed Group. That's when I remembered that when I first got the job as Daniel's secretary, I had mentioned it to Alex. He had casually replied something like, "A guy like that probably just sees your work potential." In his mind, there was no way someone like me could ever attract a man like Daniel. He must have forgotten that I had always been one of the top students in school, both in academics and in looks. Daniel looked down at me, then turned to them and said calmly, "Yes, I'm Sarah's boss, but I'm also her husband now. Since you already know who I am, Mr. Dawson, I suggest you stop bothering my wife." He didn't even give Alex another glance. Alex might have come from a wealthy family, but compared to Daniel Reed, he wasn't even in the same league. Furious, but unable to say anything, he could only glare at me. Chloe clenched her fists. "Miss Miller, didn't you plan to register your marriage with Alex just yesterday? How did you end up marrying Mr. Reed instead?" She still refused to believe that I could be this lucky. I looked at her coolly and said, "Well, then I suppose I have you to thank. If you hadn't been clinging to Alex yesterday, I might have missed out on Daniel." I paused for a moment, raised my eyebrows slightly, and then added, "But Chloe, you seem to have a thing for all the men in my life." I pulled out my phone, tapped it a few times, and then handed it to Alex. "Take a look at what your so-called pure and kind-hearted girl is really like. I hadn't planned to go this far, but Chloe just wouldn't stop provoking me." The video showed her trying to flirt with Daniel, something I had recorded earlier. Chloe leaned over to watch, and her eyes immediately widened. "Alex, I just..." Alex wasn't stupid. Of course, he knew what Chloe's intentions had been when she approached Daniel. Still, whether it was out of pride or a desperate need to trust her, he chose to turn the blame on me. His face darkened as he looked at me. "Sarah, I know exactly what kind of person Chloe is. You really think this video proves anything? Look at yourself. You were my fiancé, and now suddenly you're married to someone else. Were you already sleeping with your boss and just pretending to break up with me?" Listening to him twist everything to make it my fault, accusing me of cheating, was so absurd it made me laugh. In his version of the story, he was the victim. What a joke. I must have been crazy to ever fall for him. Chloe, hearing Alex defend her, let out a small sigh of relief. A hint of triumph flickered in her eyes. She knew Alex would always take her side. I gave a cold, mocking smile. "Alex, you can think whatever you want. I've already stepped aside so you and Chloe can be together. I'm married now. Let's just move on with our lives. If we see each other again, let's pretend we're strangers." Alex opened his mouth to say something, but Daniel cut in with a frosty tone. "Mr. Dawson, up until yesterday, before the marriage registration, Sarah and I had a strictly professional relationship. And though we don't owe you any explanation, I won't tolerate anyone slandering my wife." Then he picked up my bag, gently took my hand, and said, "Let's go." I let him lead me out of the restaurant. It had been so long since anyone had defended me like that. In that moment, my tired heart felt a rare sense of peace, and maybe even a little flutter. A week went by quickly, and I gradually got used to my new relationship with Daniel. Although he didn't give me any special treatment at work, I had to admit that he was a pretty great husband. He was thoughtful and considerate. I began to feel like I might actually be lucky. I got stood up at the courthouse and ended up marrying Daniel Reed instead. The only thing I still couldn't quite figure out was whether Daniel had also been stood up that day and had married me on an impulse. I had asked him once, but he only smiled and said, "It's not time to talk about that yet." After that, I didn't ask again. As we had agreed, I moved into his villa, but just as I was getting settled, Daniel went away on a business trip, which saved us both from the awkwardness of immediately living together. Even while he was away, he still messaged me every day, reminding me to eat on time, and for the first time in a long while, my stomach problems didn't bother me. After work today, I stopped by my old apartment to pack a few more things. A cool autumn breeze was blowing as I stepped out of the building, sending a slight chill through me. I walked to the street corner to catch a cab when suddenly, a dark figure appeared behind me, getting closer and closer. I quickened my pace, but a large hand grabbed my arm. Startled, I cried out, "Ah!" "It's me," Alex's voice said. I looked up, still shaken, and sure enough, it was Alex Dawson. "What are you doing here?" I asked sharply. "I've been waiting for you for days. I finally caught you." His voice was slurred, and he smelled strongly of alcohol. I frowned and pulled my arm away forcefully. "We've broken up. What are you waiting for me for?" You were right, he muttered. Chloe lied to me. All she wanted was a richer man. So he had watched the video. Maybe he had even looked into her actions afterward. I arched an eyebrow. Well, congratulations. You finally saw her for who she really is. But what does that have to do with me? Alex's expression darkened with regret. I'm sorry. Can we not break up? I laughed, speechless. So only after his beloved Chloe betrayed him did he suddenly realize my worth. Alex, I'm married, I said firmly. Even if I weren't, there still wouldn't be a chance for us. Ask yourself honestly, in the past 2 years, did you really love me or was I just Chloe's stand-in? I suddenly remembered a night when Alex had gotten drunk and kept calling out Evie. At the time, I had naively thought it was some nickname for me, but now that I think about it, he was calling her. In his heart, it had always been Chloe. I had just been too foolish to see it. I had been touched by every soft Evie that came from his lips, thinking it meant something. Alex was silent for a moment, then reached out to grab my hand again. Evie! Sarah, I've thought about it. The one I really like is you. I just didn't realize it before. Somewhere along the way, I fell for you without knowing it. So what? I looked at him, completely unmoved by his sudden confession. You say you like me, and I'm just supposed to like you back? Do me a favor, don't contact me again. I don't want my husband to misunderstand. The moment I said that, Alex's eyes turned frighteningly red, and his grip on my wrist tightened. I tried to shake him off, but couldn't. A wave of fear began to rise in my chest. Let go of me, Alex! Suddenly, he staggered backward from a solid punch, almost falling to the ground. I turned and saw Daniel standing there, his expression cold and his eyes narrowed. I warned you, Alex Dawson, Daniel said through clenched teeth. Don't bother my wife again. Alex wiped the corner of his mouth, smearing away a bit of blood. Fueled by alcohol, he puffed out his chest in defiance. She was my fiancée. You're the one who interfered. I looked at him and let out a cold laugh, showing him no mercy. Alex, do you not feel ridiculous pretending to be the victim right now? I'm married to Daniel Reed. I'm his wife now, not yours. So go live your own life. Stop showing up in ours. With that, I grabbed Daniel's hand and walked away, leaving Alex stunned on the sidewalk. Once we were in the car, I hesitated for a moment before saying, I just came back to get a few things. I didn't know Alex would be there. Whether Daniel would overthink it or not, I still felt the need to explain. There was no point in letting something meaningless cause an unnecessary misunderstanding. Daniel gave a low hum. I know, I'm just glad you're okay. Just that simple sentence warmed something deep inside me. He had come looking for me as soon as he got back from his business trip. This was what it felt like to be truly cared for. Daniel, I murmured, can I hug you? Without waiting for a response, I leaned over and wrapped my arms tightly around him. In this moment, I wasn't thinking of him as my boss, but simply as my husband. His body stiffened slightly, but then he raised his arms and gently held me in return. Sarah Miller, he whispered. You have me from now on. There was a certainty in his voice, and maybe even a trace of quiet longing. No man had ever said anything like that to me before. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my chest, and if I hadn't been thinking clearly, I might have really believed that Daniel Reed had loved me for a long time. That weekend, I stayed home, curled up with the idea of painting. I had majored in design during college, but it had been a long time since I had picked up a brush. I called Daniel. Daniel, I'd like to do some painting. Would it be okay if I used your study? On the other end of the line, he seemed to pause for a second before answering. Use the room next to my study. It's quieter. Go ahead. By the way, he added, when will you be home? Soon. Do you want dessert? I can bring some. I blinked, surprised, then smiled softly. If it's not too much trouble, then sure. Thank you. I've always had a sweet tooth, but I never expected Daniel to notice that. After hanging up the phone, I gathered my art supplies and headed to the room he had mentioned. Since moving in about 2 weeks ago, I had never once stepped into that space. But the moment I opened the door, I stood there in shock. It was an art studio. Inside were shelves of painting supplies, canvases, easels, brushes all pristine and unopened. Could it be that Daniel also liked to paint? As his secretary, I was well versed in his background and professional profile, but I had never seen painting listed as one of his interests. Still, the studio was warm and inviting. I quickly got lost in the quiet rhythm of painting. I had no idea how much time had passed until the door slowly opened. Daniel stepped in, holding a dessert box and a bouquet of yellow roses. "Are you finished?" he asked. I set down my brush and stood up to face him. "Yeah, I haven't painted in a long time, so I'm a little rusty." Daniel leaned in to look at the canvas, then gave a slight smile. "Not bad. Seems like you haven't lost your touch." But my attention was already on the items in his hands. I hadn't even heard what he said. "Are the flowers for me?" "Of course," he said naturally. "They're for my wife. Girls usually like flowers, right?" He handed them to me, then set the dessert box down on a nearby table. "You can try some now. Dinner will be ready soon." As I held the bouquet, a rich fragrance rose to meet me. My lips curved into a soft smile without me even realizing it. So, this is what it feels like to be cherished. The dessert was a beautifully decorated strawberry cake, my favorite flavor. "Daniel, I'm starting to think you're a boss who knows his employees a little too well." He glanced at me, his lips tugging into a smirk. "I only know you this well." A warm flush rose to my cheeks, and I quickly changed the subject. "So, what's with the art studio? Do you paint too?" Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly at the corners. "I don't paint." "Then, all of this was for me?" I asked, but he calmly interrupted me mid-sentence. "Yes." I pressed my lips together. If I still didn't realize something was off by now, I'd truly be dense. I looked up at him directly. "How did you know I could paint? I'm sure I didn't put that in my resume." He replied slowly and steadily. "You originally applied for a position in the design department. Anyone who studied design probably knows how to paint." "But this room is clearly set up for oil painting," I said, fixing my eyes on his, hoping to catch some subtle change in his expression. "How did you know I specifically like oil painting?" But Daniel was perfectly composed. No trace of guilt or discomfort crossed his face. He simply smiled and said, "Just wait a bit longer. I'll tell you someday." Then, after a pause, he added, "Miss Miller, a university's anniversary is next week. Add it to my schedule." With that, he turned and walked out of the studio. It took me a few seconds to register what he'd said. Daniel went to a university? With someone like him, he must have been the kind of campus legend people never stop talking about. So why had I never heard of him before? A few days later, the day of a university's anniversary arrived. I hadn't planned to return, but since Daniel had been invited back as a guest of honor, I tagged along in my capacity as his secretary. While helping him review the event details, I learned that the Reed Group had donated generously to the university every year. No wonder the school listed him as a special guest. I hadn't been back since graduation, so I took the chance to wander the campus while Daniel met with the dean and other alumni leaders. The air was familiar, the paths unchanged. But of course, bad luck has a sense of humor. I ran into Chloe White. Well, technically, she had been a student here too, so it wasn't that surprising. I immediately averted my gaze, pretending I hadn't seen her, and started to walk a different route. But the moment she saw me, she made a beeline straight for me. Unlike the delicate, tearful act she always put on around Alex, Chloe now looked fierce and overbearing as she stormed toward me, shouting, "Sarah Miller, did you say something to Alex? Is that why he's been ignoring me lately?" I raised an eyebrow. So when Alex asked to get back together with me the other day, he really was serious. I guess he finally gave up on her. Curling my lips into a mocking smile, I replied, "You know exactly what you did behind Alex's back. He's not stupid, Chloe." She clenched her jaw in frustration. "It's all your fault. If you hadn't shown him that video, he never would have started doubting me." "So, now I'm the villain?" I scoffed. "Alex was just a man I didn't want anymore. Why would I waste my time trying to get revenge on you two? You're not that important." Chloe's arrogant expression twisted with fury. Then she sneered, "You think you're so special just because you landed a rich man? Do you really believe someone like Daniel Reed is actually serious about you? He's just playing with you." "How do you know I'm not serious about my wife?" A cold, composed voice cut through the tension. Daniel had arrived, slipping an arm around my waist as he stared Chloe down with sharp, icy eyes. "I've said it before, and I'll say it again," he continued. "The only woman I've ever cared about in this life is my wife." His words stunned both me and Chloe into silence. Chloe's face twisted with disbelief. Her heart must have shattered in that moment. There was nothing she could say, no tricks left to use. She knew now that Daniel would never look at her the way she wanted. But me, in Daniel's words, I finally began to understand something I'd been ignoring all along. I looked at him. Daniel, did you know me long before this? Instead of answering directly, he said gently, "Come with me. There's somewhere I want to take you." With Chloe's unwilling gaze burning behind us, Daniel took my hand, our fingers intertwining, and led me away. He brought me to a place I knew well, the university's art studio. The space was just as I remembered. During my 4 years here, I'd spent countless hours painting in this room. I tilted my head toward him. "How did you know about this place? Did you really go to a university?" Daniel nodded. "I did, but I only stayed for 6 months before going abroad." Everything suddenly clicked. No wonder I'd never heard of him on campus. If he had stayed longer, someone like him would have been the talk of the entire school. He chuckled softly. "What kind of person am I then?" I searched my brain for words. Handsome, charismatic, a man who looks like he walked straight out of a dream. Daniel smiled faintly. "So that's how highly you think of me, Mrs. Reed." His eyes were fixed on me with a heat that made my heart flutter. Then he spoke again, his voice gentle. 6 years ago I saw a girl here, so bright she lit up everything around her." A memory stirred in my mind. "That girl, was it me?" I asked, unsure. I didn't remember ever meeting him before. He didn't answer. Instead, his gaze turned distant as he continued. "That day, I happened to walk by the studio. Through the window, I saw a girl in a white dress with a high ponytail, completely focused on her painting. The sunlight coming through the window lit her up like she was glowing. She was beautiful. My heart skipped a beat. I found out later there was such a girl at our school. The second time I saw her was at the freshman welcome gala. She played a piano piece beautifully. That was when I learned her name, Sarah Miller." He paused for a moment, then added, "At the time, I was a campus legend. After the gala, a lot of students tried to get close to me, but she didn't even notice I was there." He gave a soft laugh. "After that, I deliberately took detours past the studio. I ran into her several times. Every time she was lost in her own world, completely unaware of everything outside it. By now, my eyes were already brimming with tears. My voice trembled as I whispered, 'And then you left?' Daniel turned his gaze back to me, his eyes steady and warm. "Yes, studying abroad was part of my original plan, but meeting you, that wasn't." He took a breath, then said softly, "Even after I left, your image stayed with me. For 5 years, I couldn't forget you." His words hit me like a fist to the heart. My tears finally spilled over, clouding my vision blurred with tears. I had always known I was attractive. People had told me so since I was young, and I'd received more love letters than I could count. But to think that someone could quietly hold on to their feelings for 5 whole years, that kind of love I had never imagined, let alone dared to hope for. I looked up at Daniel. "Why didn't you ever come find me?" He gently reached up and wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes. His voice was a little hoarse. "By the time I came back, you were already with Alex Dawson. I could only keep my feelings buried. But I never expected you to apply for a position at the Reed Group. Maybe that was fate giving me a second chance." I sniffled softly. "So, you made me your secretary on purpose?" Daniel chuckled and gave my nose a light tap. "Promoting you to secretary was partly selfish, yes, but you also met all the qualifications. You really thought HR would have passed your resume to me if you weren't up to standard?" I pressed my lips together. "That day at the courthouse, who were you supposed to marry? If you still had feelings for me," I asked, my voice low, "why would you agree to marry someone else?" Daniel let out a quiet laugh. "Sarah, you still don't get it, do you? There was never anyone else before you." The realization hit me like a wave. My heart started racing. "Wait, you were going there that day to stop me from getting married?" His gaze was fiery, his eyes locked on mine. "I didn't think Alex was good enough for you. I was going to stop the wedding, but then he didn't even show up." So, everything that seemed like fate had actually been planned by him. All this time, he had loved me in silence. A man who seemed distant and cold had, in truth, been carrying a deep, deep and patient love, aged like fine wine, stronger and richer with time. I rose on my tiptoes, wrapped my arms around his neck, and placed a gentle kiss on his lips. "Daniel Reed, thank you for not giving up on me. I used to think Alex liked me." At least, before Chloe came back, he treated me well, but now, after everything, I finally understood. He only cared for me because I reminded him of her. Back then, I was so hung up on him that I never noticed the quiet gaze always watching me from behind. Thinking about it now, I'd been hopelessly foolish. Thankfully, Daniel never gave up on me. He reached up to brush away my tears, then lowered his head and pressed a tender kiss to my brow and eyes. "Sarah Miller," he whispered, "I finally married the girl I've always loved." He took my hand, his long fingers sliding between mine, lacing tightly together, and we walked out of the studio side by side. The soft autumn sunlight fell over us, stretching our shadows across the path ahead. That night, when we returned home, Daniel went into his study. After showering, I picked up my phone to reply to a few messages and, out of habit, I opened my social feed. To my surprise, I saw something rare. Daniel had actually posted a status update. The photo was a shot of me from behind, taken earlier that day at the university. His caption read, "Dreams fulfilled." Curious, I tapped on his profile and was stunned to discover that it wasn't his first post. He had simply been hiding them from me. I opened the very first one, a photo of me painting in the studio. The caption read, "She seems to really love painting." The second post was a photo of me sitting at the edge of a basketball court, watching others play. The caption, "Is she watching someone she likes?" My hand trembled as I scrolled through them. There was a 5-year gap, then a new post from 2 years ago. Another photo of my silhouette, taken from a distance. The caption, "5 years later, I saw her again, but now she has someone else." I scrolled faster, my heart pounding, until I reached the one from the day we got our marriage certificate. I finally married the girl I've always loved. From that day forward, all of his posts were little glimpses of my daily life, and I never noticed a thing. My eyes blurred with tears, and I couldn't stop them from falling. My chest ached with a deep, bitter sorrow that made it hard to breathe. All this time, he had always been there, watching me from the shadows, quietly standing behind me where I couldn't see him. Even when he saw me with someone else, he didn't dare step forward or disturb my life. But he was Daniel Reed, the CEO of the Reed Group. He was supposed to shine, to be admired by everyone, standing in the spotlight with the world at his feet, and yet, for me, he had been timid and restrained. I stood up and walked straight to his study. The moment I pushed open the door, Daniel looked up, his eyes immediately locking onto my tear-streaked face. Without hesitation, he rose from his seat and quickly walked toward me. I rushed into his arms and hugged him tightly. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me close. "Why are you crying?" he asked softly. I choked out the words through my tears. "Daniel Reed, why are you so stupid? Why didn't you tell me all of this? What would you have done if I had actually married Alex that day?" He understood immediately. I had seen his hidden posts, his years of silent love. He gently patted my back, his voice low and steady. "As long as you were happy, that would have been enough for me." I looked up at him through teary eyes, my lips lifting into a shaky smile. "Daniel Reed, from now on, I'll only love you." The last time I saw Alex Dawson was at a formal banquet I attended with Daniel. He called out to me just as I was about to leave. I had no choice but to stop. The woman standing next to him wasn't Chloe White. I had heard she was now dating some other wealthy heir. Alex looked at me, his expression complicated. "Sarah, how have you been?" I glanced at him coolly. "Now that I don't have you or Chloe around, I'm doing great." His brow furrowed slightly, and he looked at me as if he were still clinging to something. "Is Daniel Reed good to you?" I tilted my head, gave him a polite smile, and said, "Alex, I should thank you for not marrying me. That's what gave me the chance to marry Daniel. I'm very happy now, so please don't ever try to contact me again." Leaving those words behind, I walked back to Daniel and gently slipped my hand into his. "Let's go home," I said softly. Daniel turned to glance at Alex, who was still staring at me from a distance.